just to sort of get the mood going, the vibe, set the vibe. As soon as Benji had contacted me about this, immediately I thought of one of the greatest Sikh poets in recent history, Gurmat. And a lot of us have grown up hearing about Bhai Singh. You know, he was an instrumental figure in the Singh Sabha movement, and he alone was an incredible force. He was a very learned Gursikh, very devout Gurmat. He was part of or involved with the building of the first Khalsa school, and so many architecture projects, so many gurdwaras, schools. He helped start newspapers. He wrote a lot of books, both fictional stories based on historical facts, as well as poetry. He even translated Gurmat, and very incredibly well-respected figure, and so much so that he was one of a few in the front that were called to help compile Sikh Rhapsody. So I just have, this is actually from Professor Puran saying, but it sums up, I think, what Bhai Singh's mission really is. My eyes be half closed with the inebriation of your name resounding in my remembrance. My eyes be half closed with the inebriation of your name resounding in my remembrance. And my gait be full of a delicious languor. And I might as well fall at every step and lie wherever I may fall.
Come on, we're going to sit down. US.
So by Veer Singh, the entire field of his activities was centered around this reawakening of the spiritual path within the Sikh Panth. He wanted to awaken Punjab, all of India, all of Sikhi, the Panth. There's an excerpt here. I picked a coal and washed it with soap, milk, and curd. But that coal did not shed its blackness. It did not change its color. Separation from fire had made it black. But put it in fire and see how it glows. And what Bhai Veer Singh Ji is alluding to is that the individual, us, we are that piece of coal. And Naam is that fire, Guru, Gurmat, the path is that fire. And when you put that fire, or the coal into that fire, then that coal, that element receives its true color. That's background music. Background music. So, but that spark is what we need to rekindle within ourselves. And whether that's, 100 years ago during the beginnings of the Singh Sabha movement, or the midst of it, or right now, I think every child when it's born sort of begins a new life, begins a new reawakening within the Panth. Guru always says, "Man tu jot se utahat, paramu bachao." And I think this is also very much in line with that. Where can we find that spark? Okay, so that's just the introduction to actually what I want to do, which is two poems. One is a famous one by Veer Singh, probably his most famous one, Gamdi Kalai. There's even a movie made of that has nothing to do with the poem, but somehow was, I think, commercialized into that. But it's all in Punjabi, and it's a very unique form of Punjabi. So I don't even know if I can translate it. I'm sure I can't translate it, I should say. So if anybody else kind of gets the gist of it and you want to add to it, either way, listening to the words, you get the spirit of it. I know the first two lines, and I'll share those with you, and then I'll keep going. ਸੁਪਨੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਮਿਲੇ ਅਸਾਨੂੰ ਅਸਾਂ ਤਾਂ ਗੱਲ ਵੱਖਰੀ ਪਾਈ ਨਿਰਾ ਨੂਰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਹੱਥ ਨਾ ਆਏ ਸਾਡੀ ਕੰਮ ਦੀ ਰਹੀ ਗੱਲ ਸੁਪਨੇ ਵਿੱਚ, in my dream, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਮਿਲੇ ਅਸਾਂ ਨੂੰ. You came and met me. ਅਸਾਂ ਤਾਂ ਗੱਲ ਵੱਖਰੀ ਪਾਈ. I tried to embrace you. Nira Noor, it was just pure light. Tusi hat na aaye. Nothing came into my hands. There was nothing but that light. Sadi kam di rahe gaye, and my hands were left trembling. Ta charna te sees nivaya, sade mathe chaho na pai. Tusi ਉੱਚੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਨੀਵੇਂ ਸਾਂ ਸਾਡੀ ਪੇਸ਼ ਨਾ ਗਿਆ ਕਾਈ ਫਿਰ ਲੜ ਫਰਨੇ ਨੂੰ ਉੱਠ ਦੌੜੇ ਪਰ ਲੜ ਉਹ ਬਿਜਲੀ ਲਹਿਰਾ ਉੱਡਦਾ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਪਰ ਉਹ ਆਪਣੀ ਚੋਂ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਕਿਆ ਲਾਈ ਮਿੱਟੀ ਚਮਕ ਪਈ ਇਹ ਮੋਈ ਤੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਲੂਆਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਲਿਸ਼ਕੇ ਬਿਜਲੀ ਕੂਣ ਗਈ ਹਰ ਰਾਂਦੀ ਹੁਣ ਚੱਕਾ ਚੂਨ ਹੈ ਛਾਈ. So the gist of the next part is conveying the rest of the meaning, that feeling. I was left trembling. I'm so in awe, I'm so enraptured that I see you as high, I see myself as new, and I even try to makhadesh, but even my forehead does not even reach here. And I try to grab, I try to grab a part of you, a part of your robe, so to speak. But lard o bijli lehra. That lard that I'm trying to grab is just the waves of electricity, the waves of Naam. So I'm not grabbing it. And now, mitti cham pei, that this dirty sort of rock has now become colored. Te tusi luan vich lishke. Luan is the hair, the roam on your body. Luan vich lishke. Lishke is like jump, like sparkle. All my roam is now sparkling. And I'm left here in this trembling state of electricity. One last one from Pai Singh and then we'll share. This one is really cool, especially for this time of the day. It's all about the end of the day. It's a question and then an answer. The question comes from the dusk. And the answer, the question is, the dusk is asking a nearby river, a stream that's flowing. If you can picture, like if we walked out into the woods and we found a little creek and we all were sitting by there and we were listening to the water flowing. And the dusk is asking the river a question and then the river responds. Sanj hoye prchave chup gaye. Kyon Ichawal tu jari? Ichawal is the river. The shadows have hidden themselves. Ichawal, why do you still continue? No surod kar rahi uvehi. Main surod kar rahi uvehi. Te turne vi nahi hari. Your eyes have that same drive and you haven't gotten tired of moving. Sailani te panchi mali. Han sab aram vich aaye. The visitors, the gardeners, all others, now they too have retired for the day. Saham swadla cha reha sare, kudrat tik gayi sari. Blissful peace is pervading everywhere, and all of nature has come to rest. Now the answer from the Chawal River. Sine kich jinane khandi. The pull in the hearts of those who have tasted never sit down and rest. Nyo wali naina ki ninder, o dine rate pei vehn. The eyes of love, what sleep do they need? They continue to flow day and night. Ikko lagan lagi lai jandi, Had Dor Anant Onadi, only one desire continues to pull them. Their restlessness is never ending. Vasalo oro muram na koi. So jal te nitin hai. Their goal is nothing less than meeting their beloved. That desire forever remains.
The piece I'll be presenting is based on a Shakespearean sonnet. And Shakespearean sonnets, they follow the theme of love. So anything that Shakespeare wrote in sonnet form is always about love being expressed. So the format that sonnets use it's 14 lines. It's 3 stanzas with 4 lines in it, and it ends with a couplet. And the whole beginning of the sonnet sort of tries and conveys a message to the reader, and the last couplet is sort of like somewhat like the Rahal line in Gurbani, and it sums up the whole sonnet. So the sonnet I'll be reading you is about a Jappi, and Jappi is a bird in duck in Gurbani that has a curse on it that she can't see her husband Jakba because he's on the other side of the river, and she can only see him when the sun rises. So all night she's thirsting for the sun to come up, and then only can she see her Jakba. So the thirst sort of represents a Gursik's search for guidance, for the truth and for the light, which is innocent, so that he can be united with light, which for the Jakbi is the Jakra. So the sonnet. These eyes look around so desperately, lost in utter darkness, they feel evil. The shadow acts nil, but still cruelly. The malicious night's deeds cannot turn foible. Extinguish my fire in one moment's vision. I'm not complete without guidance of light. Numb and cold, this invisible prison, I wage my war against the wretched night. Standing, perched on the edge, my sleepless eyes long to see what beauty comes upon dawn. All look past my pains. Can you hear my cries? Come near, beloved, I beg, night, be gone. Dawn draws near, but still I'm blind. Can it be? How can these eyes survive this thirst for thee? Dawn comes near, and still I'm blind. Can it be? How can these eyes survive this thirst for thee?
So I brought an essay. It's actually a blog post, but it's really nice. It's not going to be as poetic line by line as the previous ones, but it kind of explains itself, so I'll skip it. So this is written by a blogger named R.P. Singh, on a blog called Spirit of the Khalsa. I think you've heard of it. It's called No Core Left Behind. Shortly after a recent blog post, a few parents and I were discussing our experiences presenting Sikhi at our children's school. One parent had an extremely positive experience when a Sikh Coalition presenter came to speak at her daughter's elementary school. So much so, the presenter was asked to come back and speak to some of the other grades. In hearing about this, I asked my friend's 9-year-old daughter exactly what she liked about the presentation. She was particularly excited to show her Karda to everybody, and her long hair at the appropriate times. I then asked her, how did it make you feel after the presentation was over? She replied with something that stuck with me. I felt so special. I wanted to cry. As a child, I dreaded the first day of school, not just because of the anxiety of being around new teachers and students, but that was usually the day my dad accompanied me and would explain to my teacher in his good 3-minute speech who Sikhs are and what I was wearing on my head. Some teachers were not quite sure what to do with this information, while others were very engaging and would share what they learned with the class. As difficult as it was to get through that introduction, it did come with a sense of relief, not only for that day, but for the whole year. At that moment, everybody knew I was different. Everybody knew that I followed a religion that required a certain discipline. And because of that, I looked different. That was it. After that, people could befriend me, dislike me, or ignore me as I chose to. I really didn't care. No matter how hard I could have tried, I would never look like the other kids. Being different was something I simply had to accept. And years later, it was something I grew to love. So many of my friends throughout my school year struggled to find their identity and to develop their sense of individuality. With my Sikhi, I didn't even have to try. I believe these experiences over time have helped develop my self-confidence, and those few awkward moments every year where my father would educate my teacher played an important role in that. My sister and I were raised in the same Sikh values at home, but my parents never visited her classes, nor did they ever feel a need to explain to her teachers or other students that she was a Sikh. And why should they? Let's be honest. Those 3-minute talks with my teacher were not to promote Sikhi awareness. It was simply to convey enough understanding so that I wouldn't get bullied and want to come home and cut my hair. It wasn't just my sister who missed out on that opportunity, but I would guess most girls in our community did not have that same special handling, as so many of the boys did. I wonder what teachable moments were missed, what life lessons could have been learned. Sure, we all have struggles to overcome during our adolescence that help build character. It does need to be because of our faith or identity, but I feel the boys of our community get that extra support and encouragement by default, where the girls are often overlooked. As you can imagine, there are broader issues here, much of which goes back to the double standards we see in our communities every day. Young boys are praised and encouraged to wear this thong, but what about young girls? How many Dasar Mondays for Sikh girls and women have you attended? When a boy cuts his hair, the whole community is vigilant, asking, what should we do about the boys? But a Sikh girl cutting her hair goes unnoticed. We all praise young children, boys and girls alike, when they reach milestones on their Sikhi, learn a new shabad, memorize their part, etc. But how many of us encourage a teenage girl who is aspiring to take Amrit? Last month, many of us read a fascinating article by Lisa Bloom about the traditional way we speak to young girls and how it sends all the wrong messages. It made me wonder if we need to rethink the way we talk to our little girls. Even amongst our daughters' Sikh friends, we are quick to compliment them about their clothing or about their hobbies and TV shows, but I rarely ask how many Porties and Japji Sahib they've memorized, or ask them to explain the meaning of the shabad they just sang, or explain it to them if they don't know it. Nor have I asked any of the older ones how far along they are in their practice for eternity living. Perhaps the way I interact with these young cores needs to change. To be clear, I applaud how our community supports and encourages our young saints, but I must ask, how can we carry on that type of empowerment to our cores? At a local camp this past weekend, a teacher reflected about a dialogue that took place in one of his classes. In discussing the Char Sahibzade, one student noted that Guru Gobind Singh Ji had 4 sons, but did not have any daughters. But then an 8-year-old girl stood up and said, "That's not true, he has me." This is what I want every core to feel, the sense of pride, history, and love that only the daughter of a king could feel.
This was a post that I think somebody posted on the website, and it's called Dear God. Dear God, I know it's hard trying to fight ideals of beauty and happiness every day of your life. I know it's hard trying to remind yourself that fashion, relationships, and worldliness will only provide temporary happiness. I know it's hard for you to see others happy while they live without morals, goals, or values. I know you struggle to adopt the values of your ancestors. Remember, though, that you are doing this for Guru Gobind Singh Ji. Remember that you have been blessed with the knowledge of true happiness. Remember, you can be happy if you choose to be, dear God. I know it's hard waking up every day to tie your star or tie your amal. I know it's hard to walk around the world looking like no one else. Believe me, I know what it's like to feel like an anomaly. I know it's hard to feel like a princess, queen, or soldier all of the time, and it's hard to consider your headdress a crown all the time. It's hard to be bombarded daily with the image of girls showing their beautiful dresses and still tying yours, taking a path most women couldn't handle treading on. Remember though, that you stepped on this path to meet Guru Gobind Singh Ji. You're blessed to respect his gift of hair. You're blessed to radiate the strength of his rule after so many lifetimes of waiting for this chance. Dear God, I know, oh trust me, I know it's hard to keep your hair. It's hard seeing carelessness everywhere you look. It's harder when our own blood disregards its beauty. I know it's hard to be proud of something the whole world thinks is ugly. I know it's hard to find beauty in something that the world has brainwashed us to believe is unheard of. I know it's hard to fearlessly broadcast what most women try to hide. I know it's hard when the dominant, privileged, patriarchal, hairless, white class defines beauty as something all women are naturally not. Remember though, that you are beautiful and you reflect Guru Gobind Singh Ji. Remember that divine vibrations are being sent through your gracious, beautiful gaze everywhere on your body and face, right now, dear God. I know it's hard being different. I know it's hard using your voice, especially when your own brothers are sexist. I know it's hard trying to master your desires rather than being mastered by them. I know it's hard not succumbing to worldly pleasures. I know it's hard to keep fighting and hard not to give up, especially when your sisters leave you, let alone when your conscience leaves you. I know it's hard to be truthful and to be accepted, and when you don't even accept it yourself. I know it's hard to sift through the truth in this world's dark pool of lies. At the end of the day, at the end of your life, remember, you did this for Guru Gobind Singh Ji. You wanted to be his, the Khalsa nation. You wanted to be his daughter, and in becoming his daughter, he made you a god, a prince, an heir to the kingdom of the Khalsa nation. You are not just a human being, you are a leader, a warrior, a revolutionary, a soldier. You are regal, and you have already come so far by holding your head on your palm in the dedication of true beauty, true joy, and true strength. Do not give up. Do not assume you're at the bottom of the mountain. Realize you're standing on top with the waving orange Nishan Sahib of your nation in your hand. We all make mistakes, sister, but we don't all come as far as you have. Stand tall, stand proud. Diya Dismas Diya, as in we are the daughters of Guru Gobind Singh. Pago Diya Bhena, we are the sisters of my Pago. Shera Mangur Gurjana, we will roar like lions. Nahi dar ke rehna, we will not live in fear.
What I'm reading is just another blog post, and I don't remember where I got it from. I remember just saving it on my computer because at that time it just I could really connect to it. But take it for what it is. I think this is just somebody's personal feelings typed up, and in a way, this is just kind of Sikh history alluded to in each and every sentence in this post. And yeah, just take it for what it is. Well, firstly, I am so uneducated and hypocritical. I do not follow Maryada properly. I don't know the first thing about Dhyan or Dharm. But as far as that is concerned in any way, how is anything practical? I know this is very off topic for this thread, but people above were talking about how things are practical. I don't think it's about practicality ever in Sikhi. I think it's about love. I mean, what is Sikhi without love and faith? We need to learn a lot from the Gursikhs in our history. How can you drink the water after washing the Guru's feet? How can you clean the Guru's feet with your hair? How can you sacrifice your mind by cutting it apart and putting it before the Guru? How can you go into the battlefield and not come out even if you are ripped apart? How can you work with your hands while doing Simran? How can you do Simran 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year? How can you see God in everybody? How can you have no revenge, but always justice? How could you have so much love for your Guru that whenever you call him, he appears before you in the flesh? How could you have so much love for the Guru that you manage the whole langar yourself and even get mentioned in Guru Granth Sahib? How could you say that there are millions of other people like you with the grace of Sikhs, your kingdom is established? How could you get up and allow your Guru to chop off your head with a sword? How could you pray that your skin is used as the shoes of Gursikhs? How could you have your scalp cut off, but not your hair? How can you have your body cut piece by piece and continue reciting the body? How could you be cut on a spinning wheel? How could you be sawed in half? How could you travel all around the world to preach Sikhi by foot? If your father gave you the money to invest, how could you spend it on setting up lumber for poor people? If you had been held in a concentration camp and starved for many days, how could you tolerate your children being killed and their dead bodies being strung around your neck? How could you sit in a boiling pot, then a hot stove, and then have sand poured over your wounds? How could you walk and fight oppressors while your head is cut off and in your palm? How could you stay underwater for 3 days, meeting with God? How could you stop a falling rock with your hand? How could a falling boulder melt into the shape of your body and not hurt you? How could bitter nuts become sweet by the touch of your hand? How could an ignorant, deaf, and mute man become a scholar by your touch? How could countless sick people get cured by your touch? If you realized that you had gone against hope by bringing your dead friend back to life, how could you sacrifice your own life and die right there on the spot? How could you throw yourself into a fire if the Guru promised you liberation for doing it? How could you lead 40 men back to their Guru in the battlefield? If 40 of your Sikhs deserted you and rejected you as your Guru, how could you manage to forgive them and give them liberation? How could you become the Guru's own bodyguard? If the people of another religion needed your father to sacrifice his life, how could you encourage him to do this at the tender age of 9? How could you watch your Sikhs being killed in many ways and then give your own life instead of accepting Islam and putting other religious groups at risk? How could you be only 7 years old and reign the universe as the Guru of Sikhs? How could you be so wise at such a young age that the Guru himself calls you Baba Buddha? How could you fight alongside your brothers in countless battles, despite the negative stereotypes of women being weak? How could you be burnt alive as a young child? How could you cut the heads off 5 people and bring them back to life? How could you, being the Guru, accept 5 Khalsas as your Guru? How could you tolerate losing all your family and kingdom, be forced to live in a jungle alone for some weeks, and still sing prayers that you can't live without God? How could you walk every day at 1 in the morning to get bath water for your Guru while being over 70 years of age? If the leg of your Guru's bathtub broke and only a sharp nail remained, how could you put your hand there and let it be crushed into the nail rather than allow the bathtub to fall over? If your Guru commanded you to eat the dead body under a white sheet, how could you accept the command and ask which side to start on? How could you, being the Guru, tell a Sikh that your beard was made to clean his feet? How could you hold up the ship of your Sikh on your shoulder while sitting in a hut meditating? If the whole town was taken over by impostors and fake Gurus, how could you recognize the real Guru? How could you eat the leftover nuts from the manure of horses in the Guru's fort rather than let it go to waste? How could you, despite being accused of being an elitist Brahmin, eat the leftovers of the Sangat's langar rather than let it go to waste? How could you manage to have your own son's beating heart pressed into your mouth? How could you inspire your son-in-law to become Maharaja of Punjab and then fight alongside him in many battles against oppressors? If you were the Maharaja of Punjab and made mistakes against Sikhi, how could you tolerate being publicly whipped at a Galba? How could you have the spiritual faith and strength to stop the fastest flowing river in India in order to pass your army from one side to the other? If you were a Singh warrior, how could battle with countless oppressive armies, raid and loot villages, have to rescue many young girls and women but never once have a bad thought about them? How could you fight to the death against thousands of attackers with one sword? How could you live 40 days on a hunger strike rather than break your Sarabhuahi? How could you spend almost 8 years in solitary confinement in a small dark room? How could you put yourself on the edge of a well while doing Simran so that if you fall asleep, you will die? How could you start orphanages and treatment camps open to thousands of people, regardless of their religion or background? How could you work endlessly to protect the environment and the rights of animals in your society? How could you do one Akhand Path per week every year for several years of your life? How could you defend from your side against tanks, helicopters, and highly trained commandos with just a group of Singhs? How could you get tens of thousands of people to take Amrit in the span of a few months? How could you strap a bomb to your body and sacrifice your own life to bring justice to the corrupt Chief Minister of Punjab? How could you sacrifice your own life to bring justice to the corrupt Prime Minister of India? How could you spend years and years in Punjab jails being tortured? How could you fight endlessly for human rights despite the risks to your own life? And still have pyar, still have faith, still do simran, still love Guruji, and still sing Tera Kiya Meetha Lage. How could you? Is it impractical? These were real Sikhs, each and every line above, and this is just a fraction of them all. How could they do those things for their Guru and still stay in Jardi Kala? I could never. I can't imagine. I could never imagine. I have no courage, no love, no faith. I take this history for granted every day. I'm overdramatic, unappreciative, irresponsible, and fraudulent. I could never do these things. These are the Khalsa. This is what real faith is. We are the children of an inexplicable, magnificent legacy. This is Pyar, this is Sikhi. May Guruji bless us with the dust of their feet. Bol Gurmat Patha, Bhai Guruji Ka Khalsa, Bhai Guruji.
This is really short. It's not but this is, my dad put this on the mirror in his room, so I've seen this for a long time. This is a poem by Helen Steiner Rice. It's called Let Go and Let God. When you're troubled and worried and sick at heart, and your plans are upset and your world falls apart, remember God's ready and waiting to share the burden you find much too heavy to bear. So with faith, let go and let God lead the way into a brighter and less troubled day.
This is a story that I had read when I was in college, and it kind of stuck with me then, and it still kind of stays with me today. Every time I come across it, it touches me in a different way. But it's called The Village of Children, and it's a Sakhi that's an adaptation of Baba Ishwar Singh Ji's audio tape Sakhis. Something about the village graveyard set it apart. During my travels, I had seen literally hundreds of graveyards. Usually graveyards are somber and somewhat resigned under the weight of death. But this one was different. Besides being well kept, which is in itself not unusual, it was designed more like a garden of life than a cradle of death. What set it truly apart was the cheerfulness of its structure. Its shady trees and sunny flowers seductively invited me in. Graveyards were my favorite resting places. It seemed that as soon as one exited a womb, Maya, or worldly attractions, became a human soul's companion until the gates of a graveyard. Perhaps it was the absence of Maya in such places that kept my hopes of enlightenment alive. I had left home when I had turned 20. Although I didn't know it then, I had set out to find a place free of illusions. I had traveled to majestic temples, sober ashrams, holy rivers, renowned sadhus, and any other religious place I had been told about. Yet my mind was as restless as when I had first started. The holy places and the holy people at these places were among the most devout followers of Maya. After more than 12 years of searching, I had given up hope and reluctantly decided to return home and begin a worldly life. It was on my journey home that I came upon this unusual village graveyard. Although it was only mid-morning, I gave in to the cry of my aching muscles and entered the graveyard through a small wooden door. I put down my knapsack and looked at some of the tombstones. The tombstone entries always reminded me of my transitory place on earth. But this graveyard was full of surprises. There were 3 entries on each stone. Name of the deceased person, the year of birth, and instead of the usual death of year, the 3rd entry was years of life. Even more peculiar was that the years of life entries were usually well under 20. Although it took me all morning, I visited each and every tombstone, and to my utter astonishment, I could not find any years of life over 30. The most common entry was between 10 and 12, and there were quite a few with 0 years of life. I was a curious person by nature, otherwise I would not have been there. And I had seen my share of amazing places, but this place truly mystified me. I decided to look up this village of children. I walked about a mile to the village gate. I was surprised to see people of all ages in the village courtyard. The villagers were extremely friendly. They came and, not unlike children, touched and greeted me, and offered me all sorts of refreshments and foods. I was quite overwhelmed by their attention and love. Almost all the villagers' manners resembled the innocent nature of children. Even their faces were quite smooth and somewhat glowed with purity. There was a group of elders sitting around an old tree. I decided to ask them about this heavenly place. I approached the men. They greeted me warmly, and at an appropriate time I asked, "Respected sirs, I have seen many places and many people, but even at the most holiest of these places, I could not find the life and love that pervades this place. Perhaps I am in a dream." I trailed off. They all smiled. I hurriedly continued, "I would very much like it if you would explain this rather peculiar place." I was also very intrigued by the graveyard at the entrance of the village. "Is that where you bury your young ones?" After a short pause, the most elderly man spoke. "Traveler, you look like a man who would benefit much from the story I will tell you. Listen carefully, and it will change your life." All the men around sat attentively. All the villagers within earshot came and sat to hear the old man speak. He began, "My grandfather was a Ghazi of this village. Each morning, well before sunrise, he would call out to the people into the heavens with his namaz. One such morning, he was in the midst of his prayer when he heard music from the outskirts of the village. He was a devout Muslim and was quite horrified to hear music at such a holy hour. He immediately sent some of his followers to put an end to this paganism, but to his surprise, none of them came back. The music meanwhile continued. After a long wait, he himself decided to put an end to this unholy activity. So quite angrily, he strode towards the music. But the closer he got, the more he realized that it wasn't his anger that was responsible for this hurried strides. Rather, it was the exquisite beauty in the music. Finally, when he got close to see the music makers, not only did his body lose the ability to move, his mind too stopped the madman's dance it had been doing since its birth. He literally stood rooted to a spot for the duration of the recital. The music cast a spell on him. It traveled inwards to subtle places he had read about only in the scriptures. He would often look back at that moment, and dreamily acclaimed, "I drank life to the fullest during those hours." There was a long pause during which the storyteller and the story listeners let the stillness of the story enter the depths of their beings. The elderly man continued. "The music makers were the great Guru Nanak and his companion Mardanaji. I am sure you have heard of him." I meekly nodded and mumbled, "I have, but haven't had the grace of meeting any of his followers." "That is perhaps why, my friend, you are here," the man prophetically said. "At the end of the recital, my grandfather and all the others present simply surrendered themselves to the Guru. This was largely just a symbolic act because the moment each of them had seen the Guru, they had lost themselves to him. Guru Nanak graced this village for 3 days and 3 nights. My grandfather named those days the stillness days because he said it was during those days that he and others learned about the one found only within the stillness of the mind. We observe those days like others observe their birthdays. Indeed, those days were the birthday of the village's inner man." He chuckled, "If you are impressed with the village now, you should see the love of the villagers in those fine days." But as is the nature of the human mind, the elder soberly continued, "It wasn't long after Guru Nanak's departure that the village started returning to its normal, numb, and dark existence. This greatly troubled my grandfather and others like him, who became Guru Nanaks and Guru Nanaks only. They tried very hard through teaching and preaching to keep the message of the Guru alive. Finally, after all the normal means failed, they came up with the following village tradition. Each villager keeps a diary. It is mandatory that each night before sleep, each person make an entry in the diary. Even children and people who cannot read or write have to get this entry made. The entry is simply the amount of time during the day that was spent in Simran or in Seva. At the end of the person's life, the entries are accumulated, and that, my dear traveler, is the years of life you see on the tombstones." The storyteller paused to let the magnitude of what he had told to me sink into me. He continued, "It is perhaps that which allows us to be free with our love. We are reminded each and every day what real life is. The time spent in Simran or Seva is the only life we consider as been worthy of being called life. I traveled in search no more. This indeed was the illusionless place I was seeking."
So I'm going to be reading The Flowers of Guruji, and it's a short story. I just think it's really inspiring during the times that you start doubting yourself. kind of your Sikhi and the way you should remember our Shahis and things they've done for us. It had been 3 days, 3 long, hot summer days. Sukhnadan Singh was close to dying as he laid there in a wooden cage on a cart drawn by 2 horses. He had been captured by the Mughal forces near the jungles of the Afghan. He hadn't slept or eaten properly for days, so he was weak when he was pounced upon by the Mughal soldiers. He had put up a good fight and even killed a few of them, but he was injured and he was overpowered and captured. The Mughal soldiers had tied him upside down from a tree and beaten him severely. The Mughal soldiers thought that instead of killing him, they would take him to their Nawab. He would be pleased with a fine specimen of a Sikh warrior they had caught. They thought it would be a good challenge to try and convert this kafir. It had been 5 months of traveling since Sukhnadan Singh had seen another Sikh. The last time was 5 months ago. He met a Sikh messenger traveling to take news to Baba Deep Singh Ji. When he met the Gursikh, he fell to the floor and cried at the Gursikh's feet. The Gursikh embraced him and comforted him. He had to leave immediately as his message was of great urgency. Sukhnadan Singh told him that if he was traveling towards Amritsar, he would meet his brothers once again. They both said their fateh and departed. That was 5 months ago. And how he longed to be with his family of 6 once again. He remembered the times when he was together with his band of fellow Sikh warriors. They were a band of Sikh warriors who had been given the duty to uproot certain Mughal bases and strongholds to damage the great Mughal force. They were given the task of also rescuing any kidnapped women and taken as slaves by the Mughals and returning them to their villages. He now was the last of his Jatha, and now even he had been caught and was taken to the Nawab of this district. He laid in the small cage barely big enough to sit in, and he was dying slowly. The energy had been sucked from him by the beatings in the immense sun. Suddenly, he was awoken as water splashed onto his face. A Mughal soldier on horseback trotting alongside the carriage laughed and drank some water from his pouch and spat at Sukhnadan Singh once again. Not long to go now, you dog, the Mughal laughed at Sukhnadan Singh. Another Mughal ahead shouted,
We're almost there. I can see the tower from here.
2 other Mughal soldiers had pulled up alongside the moving carriage on horseback from behind, and they mocked Sukhnadan Singh. Haha, you better be ready soon. You will have the honor of becoming one of us, and not a dog like your kind. Sukhnadan Singh stared at the soldier fiercely, and he struggled. Never, ever, I will die first. The Mughals continued to mock him. Yes, we've caught many of your kind, and most of them chose the wealth and the riches. After a few beatings, they always come around to our way of thinking. Yes, even last month, there was a big one of your Sikhs. He was beaten in public, and after, he was begging to be accepted by us. Yes, countless Sikhs have changed, and now they live in luxury with good homes and women, and a big reward awaits you if you make the right decision. Sukhnadan Singh was hurt at the thought of his Sikh brothers giving up and betraying their Guru in the Khalsa. It seriously damaged his esteem, and he started to wonder if he had the strength to keep his love for Guruji until death. If so many had given up, then what would become of him? Who was he? Was he any different? He pondered the situation and the anxiety he felt as he heard the Mughals laughing and telling stories of how many Sikhs had been converted and now served the Mughal Empire. As he looked into the distance along the rough road, he saw fields and fields of flowers in the distance. He wondered what this place was. His eyes were too weak and damaged to see properly, but he could make out the many fields stretching into the vast horizon. He lay back in the cage and wondered about his Sikh brothers and what would become of him, and he made a plea to Satguru. "O Guru, teacher of truth, great warrior from the heavens, I know now that my end is near. Please, Guruji, please, bless me with the courage to uphold justice and my dharma to the end. May I die, but never let go of your hand. You are my mighty guardian, and now, Satguru, I ask of you, bless me with the strength and valor to persevere to the end, and die a noble death, but never to give up my beloved Sikhi and the hair on my head. And Satguru Ji Dayal, Bless me with the darshan of the Gorsiks once again. My eyes are thirsting for the vision of my beloved Khalsa warriors, my family, the Khalsa. And at that, he laid back lifeless in the cage. With God's name on his mind, he repeated again and again, Vaheguru, Vaheguru, Vaheguru. A few minutes, and he lost himself in meditation. Suddenly, the cart jolted, and Sukhnadan Singh was awoke from his lazy meditation. He looked out into the fields, and he saw the flowers. He couldn't believe his eyes. He sat upright, and he looked in amazement. He could not contain the emotion, and the tears started to pour from his eyes. Every single pore on his body stood to attention, and he felt them shiver through his soul. The flowers. He had not seen flowers, but there were fields and fields of spears stuck into the ground. And on each spear, he saw the head of a Khalsa warrior. Some scalped, some beaten, some without the eyes, some burnt, some boiled. And some he recognized. Alas, he had the darshan of the Khalsa once again. And the sight was too beautiful. There were fields and fields of Gorsiks' heads on spears as far as he could see into the distance. The tears he could not contain. The Mughals thought that this sight would break Sukhnadan Singh down. But Sukhnadan Singh sat upright in the cage and with a firm look of strength and nobility on his face. He thought he should show a brave face to his Sikh brothers. The emotion was powerful. He felt his spirits rise to the sky. His strength came back. He was so proud of these beloved warriors, his brothers, the Khalsa. They had died, but they had not given up their love for Sikhi, truth, and justice. They had not wavered in the face of torture, and they had kept their faith till the end. This gave him strength and courage, and he thought to himself, I was a fool to even doubt for a second that my true Khalsa would give up and lose. They fought till the end and maintained their principles. He smiled and wiped away the tears, and out of joy, he let out the war cry of the Khalsa to pay homage to these great martyrs. Deg, Deg, Fateh! Sukhnadan Singh, over the few coming days, was offered many pleasures and riches. And he was also tortured and beaten terribly. But at every moment, he remembered the flowers in the fields. It gave him strength. He was tortured severely, and on the third day when the Mughals had given up, they left him to die a painful, slow death as they tied him to a tree, and left him to die in the sunlight overlooking the fields. Bruised, battered, and barely alive, Sukhnadan Singh lifted his head, and again he saw the fields. He smiled and welcomed death. The pain was immense, but he knew it was worth it. He had beaten the Mughals. They could kill him, but they could not take away his faith. As the hours went by, Sukhnadan Singh continued to meditate on the Lord's name. He looked out into the fields to his Khalsa one last time, and he saw in the distance a figure walking through the fields. He saw that it was a Khalsa warrior in the blue dress decked with weapons. As the figure slowly came closer, he saw that warrior was approaching each spear and kissing the forehead of each shaheed. As he came closer, Sukhnadan Singh saw from the distance that it was Guru Gobind Singh Ji himself. He remembered that the Sikhs were like flowers and that they reached their most beautiful form. Guruji would come and pick the flowers as shaheeds, martyrs. As he lost consciousness, his head fell as he no longer had the strength to hold it up. And he wondered, was it a dream? Was it real? And then, as he slowly faded away, he felt a hand on his face. And he felt a beard on his nose, and he felt a kiss on his forehead. And he knew Guruji had come. The tears flowed from his eyes as he felt the embrace of the Guru. He had never thought that he would one day become one of Guruji's flowers, and that he would come take him home. Vaheguru Ji ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji ki Fateh. Vaheguru Ji ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji ki Fateh.
So I have two pieces that I actually wanted to share with you all. The first is actually something I wrote last year at this retreat. Well, the draft of it was written here. It was during Ruben Paul Singh's workshop. The opening slide asked something like, would you identify yourself as spiritual, religious, not spiritual, or none. I don't remember the exact slide. I think it was spiritual, religious, either or both. And so these are my thoughts that were forming then, and then I've edited a little bit and shared it online with some friends. Woo! I am a bird. The desire to fly, the strength of my wings, is my spirit, guiding my way, giving me focus, my ahead. Reputations to keep, labels to make, form walls in my sky. Discover the light, break free, just fly. And the second piece is not something that I've written. It's written by Abraham Hicks, who is this person. I don't really know how to describe her, but she talks a lot about the law of attraction, and she talks about the universe is kind of this energy that we're all a part of, and that what we get in our lives is kind of reciprocated by like what we present and what we are putting out there. And the reason I picked it is because Benji and I were having a discussion about being in the present, and this is something that I struggle with. I'm constantly thinking about things. I'm constantly thinking about what's going on with my Facebook. I've got my phone close by, and it's something that I love trying to put myself in the moment, right here with you all in this moment. And so this quote reminds me of that. There's nothing tiny or insignificant. Everything is significant. And everything flows on the same basis of laws. Whether you are looking at world events or something happening in your kitchen drawer, broad and important, or narrow and seemingly insignificant, there's potential for connection or disconnection with either case. And it is only the connection or disconnection that is of really any importance. So that's the second piece there.
I read something small because I'm really nervous being up here. It's not the shortest piece of conversation.
Speak up, please.
Sorry, I don't actually understand the poem, but I'll read it. And you can tell me. I thought I knew my joy. Sorry. I thought I knew what my joy would be like when I met him. But I was deceived. I knew my ignorance when I met him. I thought I truly imagined the bliss of his kiss, but I knew not till he came. What I thought was knowledge had the dullness of death, but my ignorance beyond knowledge had brought me to his love. And that was written by Professor Gurmat.